we are here today to bring you a fantastic show. We do this every Thursday when we talk about trade, investment, and growth in Tanzania. So we're really looking forward to our guest today. And we are going to be taking a short break and bringing him into the studio.
Mapenzi ya mkataba mpaka kufa yamekwisha. Ni nemo kuna hema, mapenzi yanachosha yanafuja raha. Nafsi yangu inasema bora nimpende tu aloniza. Uchungu wa kulia daily, mapenzi alinifanya nisile. Sina kumbukumbu ile kwamba ulinikosha, no. Uchungu wa kulia daily, mapenzi alinifanya nisile. Sina kumbukumbu ile kwamba ulinikosha, no. Mwenzako mimi nilikufa, nikazikwa, nikaoza. Mapenzi yalinitesa, yalinitupa, nimefufuka, yeah. Mimi nilikufa, nikazikwa, nikaoza. Mapenzi yalinitesa, nimefufuka, mwingine alishanikaba, mapenzi yalinikausha. Natamani kuwa single, ila na upwiru unakabako. Mabinti wenye vifunda, hao ndio mi wananitoa roho. Na siri tu ya jambo lile, ni kama chakula lazima nile. Mi mbovu sana jambo lile, na ufundi wa kutosha. Na siri yake tu jambo lile, ni kama chakula lazima nile. Mi mbovu sana jambo lile, na ufundi wa kutosha. Mwenzako mi nilikufa, nikazikwa, nikaoza. Mapenzi yalinitesa, yalinitupa, nimefufuka, yeah. Mi nilikufa, nikazikwa, nikaoza. Mapenzi yalinitesa, nimefufuka, yeah.
Business Lab on Genie FM 92.5.
Welcome to Business Lab. Bhavna and myself will be having a very interesting interview today. But before we get started, let's do a quick wrap-up for last week's show, where we had the pleasure to speak to Sacri Papillon, business lead of Blue Train Consulting. We talked about the growing social media and digital marketing platform. Sacri provided a lot of marketing recommendations for companies and for startups as well. So in case you missed the show, let me remind you that you can still go to our YouTube channel, Genie FM 92.5, and see the different recommendations and inputs that she provided. But today we will have another interesting interview, right, Bhavna?
Absolutely. We're really looking forward to it. So today on the show, we have an incredible speaker, very well known in this particular area, Mr. Salim Awad, CGIA. If you don't know what that means, it's a Chartered Global Investment Analyst, who is the CEO of SSC Capital, amongst many other things. SSC Capital is a strategy and investment banking firm for clients looking to grow their business and ensure that their investments generate best returns for themselves. The investments are sustainable and create long-term value. And the vision that SSC has is to build a one-stop Pan-African marketplace for advisory, financial and investment services for the enterprise and consumer clients. So welcome to the show, Salim. First of all, congratulations as well. You've just been appointed as chair of the board at the Cereals and other products board of Tanzania. So
Thank you.
Congratulations. So if you'd like to tell us a little bit more about yourself, please, because a lot of the listeners, I've kind of summarized what you do, and there's a lot more you do than just what I've summarized this into.
Yeah. So thanks for having me here today. It's a pleasure to be here and to share my few thoughts on this subject. So as you introduced me, my name is Salim Awad. So I'm a CEO of SSC Group, basically, where SSC Capital is part of that. But I wear, I would say, 5 hats as a person. So one is I'm an advisor, so I advise companies, individuals through my company in the space of finance, investment, strategy, in all other places in between. Number 2, I'm a writer, so I write. I've written 3 books, and I also write articles in local newspapers and stuff like that. I speak, so I usually do public speaking as a subject matter speaker, so not as a motivational speaker. So I speak on the things that I know on finance and investment. But I'm an investor as well, so I invest in financial markets, so things around stocks, real estate and stuff like that. But we also invest in startups. And lastly, I'm now a public servant as well.
Yes.
So I say for the public. So those are the 5 hats I wear.
It's quite a lot of things to do. How do you juggle it all? Like I got tired listening to it. I was like exhausting. But I suppose it's the drive that you have. That drive, you know.
Yeah.
So, what made you start this? Because when we dig deeper into just SSC,
Yeah.
I mean, it's a minefield,
Yeah, so the history is interesting because for me, honestly, when I did my first degree, my vision and my passion was pretty much to work for the public then. So I was employed before. I worked for different employers. I worked for the government as well then. And then I quit and started SSC 13 years ago with a passion pretty much more around finance, investment, and trying to see, what can we do? Because I learned then there's a very low financial literacy in Tanzania, just like in many other African markets, which still is in most places. So I thought probably we can build up something that will change people's lives through finance. And that's one thing that has been driving everything that I do and everything that I'm planning to do in the future.
Can you tell us about the many ventures you have under SSC Capital?
Yeah, so SSC Capital is the main thing that we do, is the primary company, but now we have converted into SSC Group. So under SSC Group, we have 5 lines of businesses. One is advisory, where we have SSC Capital, that most people know. Secondly, we do investment banking. So for those who don't know, investment banking has nothing to do with taking people's deposits. It's a service where you do a couple of things, such as wealth management, asset management, take people's money, invest on their behalf. You raise money for companies. So Gene FM is trying to raise money, say $2 million, you want to expand. And then we'll come in and structure that for you. So under that,
we will call you immediately.
Yeah, so under that we have 2 businesses under investment banking. So one is we call Shirka, which is, I think we're going to talk about halal investing. And then of course in this month of May we launched a Diaspora Investment Fund. We call Diaspora Invest as a separate business as well.
Yeah, I saw that yesterday. I was like, that's a really good move.
Yeah. So thirdly, we have another division called Financial Services, and which of course we also have different ventures. So we have a lending business, SME lending business, we call it Jabal No Finance. We have a small insurance company. The idea was to insure our own activities, not for clients, but now we're trying to transform it and do for other people as well. We also have a leasing business, which is a fintech. It's yet to come out. So we're building a digital platform where people who have equipment that they're not using can rent to other people on short-term basis when they're not using them. And people who need this equipment but they don't need to buy, they can rent from these people and use them for short-term and then return after they use. So we do that through a digital platform.
It's
Very interesting.
so interesting, right?
So interesting.
Yeah.
So you, as you mentioned, you work in different 5 business lines.
Yeah.
You also work with different, let's say, type of companies that work in many sectors.
Yeah.
We can see NGOs, we can see private sector.
Yeah.
Do you work also with public sector
Yeah.
at least?
We do.
And you work also, you say that you work on startups, and I think many of our listeners are looking to launch maybe their startup, and they'd like maybe to hear more about your services and about your perspective. So the question that we have: what signs or indicators do you look for in a startup to know if it can generate money or not?
Okay, good question. So one thing is, which that sounds like a cliche now, is one thing that every investor is looking at in a startup, or if you want to build a startup, one thing for sure that you need to think of is what problem are you solving. So this is the most critical thing that everybody talks about, because there's a lot of things behind that, because the problem you solve will also indicate the size of the market where your business will be operating. The secondly is, you have a ready market. If people have skin issues and you're building a skin product that is very different from what people are offering in the market, immediately you have customers, because people who have skin issues probably use your product. So the problem that you solve is critical in that sense. But secondly is the team. So who are these people behind that? You can have the greatest idea on earth, you can have all the investments on earth, but if you have wrong people behind that, nothing will move. It's because everything is about execution. And execution is about people. So second thing is the people that you have. And thirdly is the competitive edge that you have. Because you can bring in a skin product to the market, but how many people have skin products? There are thousands of skin products in the market. So what separates you from the rest? What makes you special? What makes you a product that ticks? If someone walks into a beauty store, then they'll probably pick your product. So these are three things which are critical among so many other things that probably you want to look at in startup before you invest in.
No, definitely, and it's true. I wish not, but it's true that sometimes we can see great ideas, and sometimes also not the team, and maybe the startup does not launch.
Yeah.
And it brings us to our next question, which is the most challenging timeline for startups. And correct me if I'm wrong. Usually are the first 2 years.
Yeah. True.
So I believe you call this a valley of death. What are recommendations to survive this?
Yeah, so the valley of death is a period where a company that is sustaining negative cash flows, meaning you're not making money. And if you can sustain that for 12 months consistently without any change, you'll die. That's where more than 90% of businesses die. That's why we call it the valley of death. So there's so many things that you can do. Unfortunately, when you're struggling, probably you're about to drown. There are things that you need to do for you not to drown, and the things that you do actually will make it easy for you to drown. The same thing with businesses. So some startups are doing wrong things when in the valley of death. They're trying to hire more people. They're trying to invest more. So they take more and more money out in terms of bringing more money in. So some of the things they need to do is, one, they need to stop doing any what we call capital investments. So don't hire a new office, don't buy new laptops, don't expand your office, don't do that, because that will not generate you money immediately. Number one. Number two, you need to hire people but not on salaries. We call non-salaried employees. Meaning, say if you build a startup, you have 3 co-founders, and then maybe you need a developer, and maybe the developer in the market, you have to pay him $5,000 and you don't have the money. You need to find a way to bring this developer on board. Yeah. Whether you're going to give them some small equity in a company, so they'll be part of that, so there'll be no payroll cost for this developer on one end. Or you may agree that if you don't want to give them equity, you can give them some sort of future compensation when the company raises money from investors, and then that's when they can exit and they can pay all their money that they were not paid before. And the third thing that you need to do is you need just push revenue. And the simplest way to increase revenue without adding cost for you to bring in revenue is to improve your services on repeat customers. Because every time when you acquire one client or one customer, there's a cost to that. We call acquisition cost, customer acquisition cost, CAC. So if you want to bring more revenue from new customers, that simply means you have to incur more and more cost. Yeah. And this is the wrong time for you to incur more cost. So what you do, you just focus on existing clients, you give them better services, those that can bring you more and more business back to you. So the repeat clients will be the best way for you to survive that.
A quick follow-up question. Is this just the elements of cost? Is this a problem identified that helped you come up with the idea of a digital platform to rent equipment?
True. It's one of them.
Well, here's a different example.
Yeah, correct.
To be fair, I'm also a photographer, and in England, the UK, leasing is very, very common.
Yeah.
And here, not so much. Like here we have, it's done on a small scale, very private. You can hire the lens for 24 hours from someone, etc., but not actually done in a proper way where you can go online and lease something specifically.
Yeah.
And Salam, you talked very briefly about the areas that your business is involved in, strategy, investment banking, financial services. Which areas do you actually receive the most requests from? Which are the areas where maybe you have the most clients in?
So historically, because SSC Capital started pretty much as an advisory firm, so we only, at that time, it was only one line of business, it was just advisory. So even the marketing and the branding and the popularity that we have in the market is pretty much tied to advisory. So this is one line which brings us more businesses and more activities currently.
What's your favorite?
Good question. So my favorite actually are 2. One is the investment banking. It's pretty much on wealth management. I think people need to manage their wealth properly before they retire so they can live well after retirement. And I think we have that huge challenge in Tanzania. And secondly is venture capital, where we can invest in startups and grow Tanzania, with the new founders and put Tanzania on the map.
Love that. Love your whole thing about venture capitals, because when we come back into our next section, we're going to be talking a little bit about fintech, halal investing, and also a little bit about venture capital.
Yeah.
So if you've just joined us, we are talking to Salim Mawad, CEO of SSC Capital or SSC Group, with myself, Nadia, and Bhavna on Business Lab. We will see you right after the break on 92.5 Genie FM.
Sabi girl no dey too like talk. Animals dey in human form. Body man nobody like walk, but you must hustle if you want job. You no finish they won't fight us. If them they run them no fit catch up. I know they form say I too righteous. No con they form say you too like us. We no get the time for the hate and the bad energy. Got my mind on my money. Make you dance like broccoli. Steady green like broccoli. Steady on my grind, oh yeah, what they want telling me. Could deny my fantasy. They want to check if my tap ain't no wrong. But it they rush well, it be much. Now gotta make my tap in the rush. The kind of money we touch, yeah. It they rush well, it be much. No be hype, everybody they crush. There's no darling with us. You never thought you dey from papa. Which kind of money we never see before. Cause hello me, got me feeling I'm the one. Ajay. Can never take my cake away. Ajay. You can't count my grace. I just did my lane. Me no get the time for the hate and the bad energy. Got my mind on my money. Make you dance like broccoli. Steady green like broccoli. Steady on my grind, oh yeah, what they want telling me. Could deny my fantasy. They want to check if my tap ain't no wrong. But it they rush well, it be much. Now gotta make my tap in the rush. The kind of money we touch, yeah. It they rush well, it be much. No be hype, everybody they crush. There's no darling with us. Cause it they rush well, it be much. Now gotta make my tap in the rush. The kind of money we touch. It they rush well, it be much. No be hype, everybody they crush. There's no darling with us. There's no darling.
Thank you for tuning into Business Lab.
Welcome back to Business Lab with myself, Bhavna, and my co-host, Nadia. Today we are speaking to Salim Mawad, the CEO of SSC Group, and we've been talking about all things within his business that he's been part of: advisory, investment banking, private equity. So I'd like him to just introduce himself in Swahili to our listeners and tell us a little bit about what him and his business do. So over to you, Salim.
Asante sana. Kwa majina naitwa Salim Mawad. Ni afisa mtendaji mkuu wa kampuni ya SSC Group. SSC Group ni kampuni inayofanya kazi zake kwenye maeneo mbalimbali, ikiwemo kutoa ushauri wa biashara, ushauri wa fedha, ushauri wa uwekezaji, lakini pia tunatoa huduma mbalimbali za kifedha, tunaita fedha mbadala. Kwa hiyo kuna vitu tunaita crowdfunding, venture capital, Islamic finance, halal investing na vitu vingine kama hivyo. Lakini pia nafanya kazi za uandishi as an author na vitabu vitatu nimeandika, lakini pia naongea kwenye public kwa kutumia kwa kutengeneza knowledge ya vitu ambavyo navifahamu, hasa kwenye maeneo ya fedha na uwekezaji. So hiyo ndio vitu tunavyofanya kama kampuni, na tunatoa huduma hizi kwa watu binafsi, makampuni, mashirika ya serikali, wawekezaji wa kimataifa na mashirika sio ya serikali kama NGOs.
Asante sana. Thank you for that.
Before the break, we were talking about startup, and we'd like to continue talking about it because Africa's fastest growing startups, according to Financial Times, are mostly tech-based companies, and the fintech sector has been growing at rapid pace in Tanzania. Part of the reason for this rise is that Tanzanian regulators are actively encouraging fintech innovation, and as we know, fintech is a powerful tool for achieving financial inclusion for Tanzania's large unbanked population. We can see a lot of applications now are growing in Tanzania, growing of use. We would like to hear your thoughts on the rapid growth of this sector, and do you think Tanzania is ready for this growth?
Yeah, so it's a good question. So as you rightly put it, fintech is the leading vertical when it comes to startups, not just in Africa but across the world.
Definitely.
So fintech startups continue to receive as you said, the largest recipients of venture capital money. But again, if you look at Africa now, we are almost close to 10 unicorns. So unicorn is a startup that has reached a valuation of $1 billion, and 7-8 out of 10 of these startups are fintechs. So that's the size and
it's a big number.
Of how fintech is in Africa. So for Tanzania, I think it's a no-brainer for fintechs to really grow in the potential that it has. It's only 17% of Tanzanians are formally banked, less than 5% of insurance penetration in Tanzania. Less than 1 million people are investing in the capital markets. So you still need to do a lot of work in terms of bringing more people into financial services, as you said, financial inclusion. So that's where we see the role and potential fintech startups in Tanzania. But I think it's just a flaw that we see from other markets coming to Tanzania as well. So everyone is positioning himself now to see, okay, if investors see fintech as their first place to go, how can I position myself as well to be where investors want to go? So that's another thing that probably you see more people trying to build up their fintech startups as well. But I think we have had few success stories here. So I think we know Benjamin Fernandez, who has built an interesting company, a payment company from international money transfers, and he raised money here in Tanzania. But we also have another company called Ramani, which has also raised money recently, more than $30 million.
On agriculture.
So you see that. So Ramani has two wings. One is the distribution company, and then they also have a finance company within it. So the way startups are built now in Africa and many other parts of the world is every single sector will have a layer of a fintech. So if you're running an agri-tech startups, so focusing on agriculture, at the end of the day, you will have to find a way for people to buy and sell and make payments on your platform. So that's where a fintech thing will also come in. So all the businesses that you see in Africa, especially in fintechs, in all the startups rather than fintechs, are building platforms and embed fintech within these startups. So that's where you see the huge potential of fintechs. And of course, the government now, we've had huge challenges when it comes to the regulatory framework. So if you were to start a fintech startup today on payments, the government would treat you just like any other payment company. They treat you as a bank. So the capital requirements will be crazy for people to start these businesses. But I'm happy now the central bank has released a draft regulations for what we call, sandbox regulations, where startups will have this specific regulatory framework where they can, be regulated and have their special requirements that you don't necessarily need if you were a non-fintech company. So this, I think, will also unlock a lot of opportunities for fintechs here. But the other thing is fintech startups have also set up their own association in Tanzania, which I think will also help to drive the growth of fintech startups in Tanzania.
Very interesting. And when we talk about the growth, we talked about regulations, because definitely we need some framework to help and to help advance this growth. There is a question that we received also from, let's say, internationals who are not in Tanzania. They always ask the question about the infrastructure. So when it comes to electricity, when it comes to the access to data, because we also talk about Tanzania as a 62 million population, which makes it also sound as a very interesting market to internationals. But how do you see now the improvement of infrastructure, the access?
I think if you have never done business in Tanzania, this is the best time to do business. I think the government we see, the president is very open to and very aggressive to improve the business environment in Tanzania. We see that. We see investments are recovering to very pre-COVID levels. And there's a lot of investments actually happening. We all know of investments in power which are happening. Yes. The president has just signed what we call the host agreements with gas companies. So the gas project are also coming into the forums as well. So we have this huge mix. So one thing about Tanzania that people don't understand is, yes, the cost of electricity could still be up, but this cost will go down significantly in the near future because the power sector in Tanzania will be very much diversified. You depend on the water for hydroelectric power, or you depend on we're going to probably go into thermal as well, but also now the gas thing, which takes the majority part of the power mix in Tanzania. So with commercialization of gas in Tanzania in the next few years, will make electricity cheaper, accessible to everyone. Yes. And of course, I think we position ourselves as a country to also export electricity to other neighboring countries. So in terms of power, I'm pretty much sure there's a serious investment which is happening. But we also see even in the airline, even though of course our airline is still struggling, but you see now the government is also buying 4 more airlines. Yes. Because at the end of the day, people don't understand this. You need airlines if you want to be a business destination. People need to have a direct fly from Dar to London, from Dar to Sydney, from Dar to Ankara, Turkey.
Yeah, and even with Tanzania itself, because it's a huge country.
Tanzania is so big. Yeah, so you need to travel in between. Yes, correctly. So I think this is a serious investment which is happening in infrastructure space.
I think as soon as they realize that they need to maybe even work on their airfares within the Tanzanian cities, that will also probably come down, and that will also open up, I think, the trade within the country, people trading within the countries. Is really interesting because when we talked earlier about having a team and having a workforce, both Benji and Ian and Romanian have a fantastic team, and they have invested in that team. They're not shying away from it, and the teams are global, and I think that really helps bring, as a venture capitalist yourself, you'd probably be more interested in that because you can see the team than one solid person. So just brings me into the next question on fintech in terms of what gaps are they? Because there are clearly some gaps when it comes to investing, and yes, as a venture capitalist you might invest in it, but are there gaps that you see in things like insurance? How do you feel about that?
Yeah, so one thing that we need to know is, good question, fintech startups, with everything that they do now across the continent, more than 50% of subsectors within fintech startups are payments. So it's either payment system or payment infrastructure. So it's just one subsector within fintech that dominates the industry. So we still need to see more subsectors within the fintech area to come up as we spoke earlier. The insurance penetration is still very low, not just in Tanzania, but across Africa. So we probably hope to see more insurtechs come into the market and make it easy for people to buy insurance policies, claim when they have damages, get paid digitally. You don't have to walk into any insurance company for you to get insurance services. Gone are those days. But as well as on wealth management, people are always complaining about they make money, but the next thing they see is they're broke. So what can we do in terms of simplifying wealth management to people with less money? Because if you come to me today, you want me to invest your money, I'll tell you, what the minimum investment I can do for you is $50,000. But how many people can do that? So you have people who have meager income, but they need to save and invest their money. So the best way to do that is to minimize the cost, increase access, and that's where you need the role of fintech to do that. So I think there's a huge role for fintechs in the space of wealth management, but so many other things that we can do across the financial services industry.
And it's just infinite possibilities, right?
Yeah.
Like there's so many things that can just become digitized, and people can have access just on the phone. So the UN Sustainable Development Goals, the Tanzania National Vision of 2025, and the policies that related to that, especially to do with MSMEs, education, development, recognize the central role of entrepreneurship in development, especially in Tanzania as a country. We know there's a huge drive to increase the number of successful startups, but the biggest issue and the biggest challenge for startups, not just fintechs, has been the lack of funding or mentorships. And, you know, it's for the estimated 33 fintechs that we have in the country, only 36% of them have managed to secure seed funding or growth financing, while 35% are like bootstrapping with, you know, friends and family helping them out. So how do you think we can make this better? How can we encourage them to get investment, to, you know, to speak to venture capitalists? I'm like, for me, for example, if I was looking, I would probably be a bit frightened, because I'd be a bit like, well, if I go to Salum, he's going to ask me for a lot of money, or I'm not going to have this or that. What are the things that they could do? How can we bridge that gap?
Yeah, so the good question. So the thing is, as you say, 1 million youth enter the labor market every year, and less than 10% of these guys get jobs. So the only solution for you to support these young people is to help them become entrepreneurs. And when they become entrepreneurs, of course, the challenge of access to finance pops up. The dominant source of finance in Tanzania is still banks, but banks provide less than 20% of the money to SMEs and small businesses. So you still need to have other sources of financing for startups and SMEs, and that's where we see the role of what we call alternative finance. So one of them is what we call angel investors. So angel investors these are individuals who are investing their own money to early stage startups, taking the risk. And if they do that, what happens is they take these startups up to speed, and they take them to a level where a venture capitalist will come and invest in. Because one of the things that you see is when companies start, as small as they are, their capital requirements are small as well. So someone is raising $20,000 to say 150K. You don't expect someone to fly all the way from New York to come to Tanzania and invest in a $50,000 deal. It won't happen. So you need to have people locally who will do that, so they can bridge that gap and let international investors come in. So that's the challenge that we have here. And how would you get these angel investors? This is people like yourselves, where you make your money, 10% of your money you can allocate and set aside, and and then we can pull that money from 10, 15 individuals, and then say we can raise $50,000 and invest in one company. So that's one of the things that we are trying to push here. So in 2018, I founded the Tanzania Angel Investors Network. So we can bring people like myself that say, you know what, put $2,000, put $5,000, put $10,000, and then let's see, what can we do to invest in this one startup. So get your CEO and say, you know what, out of the money that you make in a year, take away 5-10% of your money, and then we put that money in a pool, get the next CEO, and then we know at the end of the day, we can have a pool of $1 million. If you have a pool of $1 million, you can invest in small tickets, say, of $100,000 into 10 startups. If we invest in these companies and you invest well, you'll take this company to a level where now they will be asking, say, for $500,000, $1 million, $2 million. When they're doing that, it's easy now to bring in venture capital money in Tanzania. So that's one of the ways you can do that. But secondly, we also need to see how can we leverage government money and donors' money to invest in startups that other people wouldn't. We call de-risking. So if someone comes to me now with an idea, I give a very simple example if the time allows. Sure. So we had a company. I tend to use this in my main examples. So these guys built an artificial intelligence solution to detect early breast cancer. So they came to us, they had a solution, but that solution was tested and validated by using demographic data from South America. So when they came here, they were asked to validate using Tanzanian data. So they had to do that. So they needed close to $100,000 to do that. So the question is, if they do the validation here, and you put in close to $100,000, if the results are negative, you have lost your money.
Yes. Yep.
So that's where we need the government and donors' money to come in and finance this startup to do the validation. If the results are positive, and that's where we can also come in. But we also see, I don't know if you've heard of that each local government authority is required to allocate 10% of their revenue collections to finance young people, women, and people with disabilities. And of course, there's been a lot of misuse of this money, because 50% of all this money is not paid back. So what we're trying to say is, which I think the government is trying to do now, is to change the mode of that. So what we're saying is the government can create what we call a fund of funds, where you put all this money into one bigger fund, and then you create small funds, and then say Salom and you guys, you know what, you can build small funds, say of 1 billion Tanzanian shillings, and then you can use those small funds to invest in startups. So the government cannot invest in companies. They don't have the expertise to do that. They don't have the experience to do that. So get this money to people with expertise, experience, know the market, to manage the money on your behalf. So those are the things that we're trying to push for in this market, to unlock financing for
Brilliant.
startups.
Absolutely brilliant. I didn't know that, actually, that they had to invest that money back.
Yeah.
You know, another part of your business is working with halal investing.
Yeah.
Again, you talked about, is it Shirka?
Shirka, yes.
And you know, is this because you're a member of the Dubai Chamber of Commerce, or did it come about because, you know, maybe you're practicing, or was it just a niche that you identified that actually, you know, there is a large population of Tanzania is Muslim,
Yeah.
and they're not going to invest if it doesn't suit their needs?
Yeah, so it's a niche, definitely. So close to half of the population are Muslims.
Yeah.
As a Muslim, of course, one of the requirements is you cannot just use any financial services. There's a prohibition of interest, there's a prohibition of so many other things. So you need to comply, even with your finances. So when it comes to investing, if you look at the Tanzanian financial markets today, if you want to invest in bonds, you cannot as a Muslim, because bond pays interest. If you want to invest in stocks, you cannot just invest in any stock in the stock market. So you need someone to guide you if these stocks that you want to invest in are halal. So, and because I'm a Muslim myself, and in the community, I saw that people struggling to invest their money. People are making more money, but they don't know where to invest this money. So they end up buying, you know, old school stuff, buying lands and properties and stuff like that. Yeah, you know. So we thought probably we can build something for the market. So that's the way we saw that niche, as you said, and we built the solution to simplify halal investing in Tanzania and later across Africa.
You talked earlier about also I was so happy to hear you talk about the engagement of the public entities, also the international organizations, the donors that can also advance money. We think it's very important to have also these different entities collaborating together to advance projects. And I know that thanks to that we can talk more and more about sustainability.
Yeah.
NGO, private companies alike are rooting for this. At SSC Capital, you work with an impact and sustainability. We saw that in your website, talk about sustainability a lot.
Yeah.
And so why do you think this is so important? And what are the key elements of sustainability when it comes to financing a business?
Yeah, so good question. So the global business world now is moving away from just profit. It's not just about profits anymore.
Yeah.
Because if it's just about profits, what happens is you're going to utilize all the resources at the expense of the future. So my kids, your kids won't have anything to use to generate the income and sustain their lives as well. So now we talk about triple P. So doing a business now is about 3 Ps. So the first P is profit. So you still need to be profitable as a company. The second P is people. So you need to do things that will have positive impact to people. And the third P is planet. So you need to take care of the environment where you're operating your business. So you need to take care of the 3 Ps if you want to be a successful and sustainable business. And that's where SSC comes in as well. So we build these systems, we build these structures, these frameworks for companies to comply and to be able to run businesses sustainably and efficiently for the future. So what we're saying is, actually, if you look at statistics, they show that companies that comply with triple P make more money than the companies which do less.
Wow, this is very interesting. So I hope you are listening very carefully and to all these wise words and to the different business startups recommendation. You can still watch our show on our YouTube channel, Genie FM 92.5. Before we wrap up our interview today, we will hear our final music song and get back to you shortly.
I'll be because of you, I be on the phone all night long. Oh. Don't be smart when you do it to me. Oh no, no, no. I be on my business, shawty, but you be on my mind, shawty. Let me, all of my honey, kiss me to the cellular, kiss me to the phone. Can't you see I'm into ya? Can't you see I'm in love? Kiss me to the cellular, kiss me to the phone. Yeah, messing with my medulla, I can't talk alone. Oh no, no. Emiliano, 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 no. Emiliano, 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 no. You're one in a million, in a million, in a million, no. My Emiliano, 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 no. Girl, I wanna know what it feel like, what it feel like. Like I know I see beat for real life, for real life. In my condo, loving up your body in fast and slow mo. Right, you it's my combo. Can you never ever let me go? Dancing, kiss me to the cellular, kiss me to the phone. Can't you see I'm into ya? Can't you see I'm in love? Kiss me to the cellular, kiss me to the phone. Yeah, messing with my medulla, I can't talk alone. Oh no, no. Emiliano, 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 no. Emiliano, 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 no. You're one in a million, in a million, in a million, no. My Emiliano, 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 no.
This is Business Lab on 92.5 Genie FM.
We are back to Business Lab on Genie FM 92.5. Bhavna and myself, we are having a very interesting interview today with Salam. In case you missed the show, well, you can still watch it on our YouTube channel on Genie FM 92.5. Salam, as we are wrapping up the show, there is one question that we would like to ask to all our guests. And I can't wait actually to combine all different inputs because that will be very interesting and valuable recommendations. What are your top recommendations for future investors in Tanzania? You say Tanzania now is the time to invest,
Yeah.
but what are your top recommendations for
Yeah.
future investors?
So one thing is, don't invest in Tanzania while sitting in London. You have to come
Yes.
here. You have to come here and see for yourself. Number one. Number two, Tanzania is not Kenya. Tanzania is not Nigeria. Africa is 54 different markets, different culture, different currencies, different languages. Yeah. So when you come here, you need to know that Tanzania is different. You don't do just copy and paste
Yes.
business models from Tunisia and you want to bring it to Tanzania. So that's the second thing that I want to tell them to do. But thirdly is investment is about relationships. And one of the most important things in a relationship is hospitality. People need to be hospitable. You know, they need to give you the reason to smile. You don't want to be in a place where you just want to make money. And Tanzania offers that to a large extent. So you can come to Tanzania because it's a place where I think you can get a lot of that. But again, of course, lastly, this is a time to invest in Tanzania because there's so many opportunities across all sectors. If we were to share with you the numbers here, then you will go crazy in terms of the opportunities which we have as a country.
Fantastic. I love those. So before we wrap up the show, Salam, is there anything else you'd like to add? Anything you'd like to tell our listeners, young people who might be listening?
Yeah, so I think for the young people, especially those who aspire to become entrepreneurs or those who are entrepreneurs already, when things get really tough, just get rest, don't quit.
Fab. Love that. Okay, thank you very much for listening to Nadia and myself today on Business Lab on 92.5 Genie FM with our incredible speaker today, Mr. Salam Awad, the CEO of SSE Group. if you've missed the show, you've just kind of clicked on to the radio and you've seen us talk about this interesting topic, you can watch us live replay. Watch the live replay on YouTube or go to geniefm.com. And we will see you again next week, same time, same place, on 92.5 Genie FM. Have a great weekend. Thank you very much, Salum. Thank you very much, Nadia.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.